I pulled into the valet lane a few minutes late, engine still humming. I adjusted my tie and stepped out into the warm spring air of Lexington, Kentucky. The private country club loomed ahead, manicured lawns, white columns, and two bright lights glaring through the evening haze. I hated being late, but the plumbing emergency at my shop ran long. I smoothed my jacket as I passed the entrance arch, hearing distant laughter and clinking glasses through the open doors. The scent of gardenias hung in the air. Family greeted me with tight smiles. "Glad you made it, Trent. Enjoy yourself tonight." Standard courtesies I'd learned to accept. I felt their eyes flick to my worn shoes, the modest ring I still wore from college days. I knew where I sat in their silent judgments. Sterling Redmond and his family looked immaculate, not one wrinkle, not one forced laugh. He smiled wide, shook my hand too long, then clasped Harper's shoulder. His mother nodded curtly at me, as if testing whether I belonged. I swallowed. I had no illusions tonight would be easy. A waiter passed with champagne flutes. My relatives offered polite nods. Loretta, my mother, shot me a look weighted with worry and pride. My father, Carl, hovered in the background with that look of a man who doesn't want to offend, doesn't know how to intervene. I stood between them and the Redmonds, feeling the tension like a low hum. Sterling Rose lifted a toast glass. To new beginnings, perfect unions, and lasting legacies. His voice was smooth but cold. The legacies hung in the air. It felt like a coin flip between praise or judgment. Glasses clinked, faces masked glee. The toast ended, and somewhere a piano chord faded. I looked at Harper across the table. Her eyes were distant, expectant. I thought, this is supposed to be her moment, not mine. Yet every chair, every face said otherwise. I exhaled, kept my expression neutral. Dinner began. The appetizers arrived. Lobster bisque served in delicate shells. The conversation hummed lightly. Travel, careers, spring weddings. I spoke little, only when asked. I watched Sterling and his family move through the room with perfect symmetry. My instincts buzzed. Something didn't add up. Midway through the main course, Sterling leaned forward and said, loud enough for the table behind us, "Trent here brings a humbly earned paycheck, but let's be real. He's always felt a little low class in rooms like this." Laughter, some forced, some cruel, echoed. I froze. My fork hovered midair. Harper looked away. Loretta pressed her napkin, eyes darting. My father swallowed hard, impassive. No one spoke for me. So I sat, forcing a calm smile, nodding politely. Inside, fiery years of such remarks flared. I traced memory, high school dinners, cousins murmuring charity case, my own attempts to shrink so I wouldn't be noticed. I swallowed bile and kept staring at Sterling. I remembered my grandmother's words. Class is how you hold yourself, not how others see you. Dinner resumed. I white-knuckled my utensils. The rest of the table chatter felt hollow, like glass. I watched Sterling puff out his chest, basking in control. Harper's gaze flicked to me, uncertain. I bowed my head, suppressed the rage, but I didn't yield. Later I slipped away into the hallway. Sterling followed, swaggering. "You know," he said, "Harper deserves someone with a pedigree. She deserves better than this." I snapped, "Class isn't what your family claims. It's what you choose." He smiled cruelly. "Your sister knows her place. Maybe you should know yours." I held back and walked away, letting silence answer. My mind recoiled to high school, my cousins, their insults, the weight I carried. But I also remembered the lily-fold napkin grandmother used to leave by my plate. She taught me dignity, taught me patience. Back in the dining room, I pulled out my phone beneath the table and searched Redmond family history. The screen glowed. One photograph made my breath catch. Sterling standing beside a family I didn't recognize. And I felt, this wedding isn't just about my sister anymore. I needed air. The room felt too tight, the smiles too fixed, the laughter too rehearsed. After Sterling's little stunt at dinner, I slipped out of the main hall and wandered into one of the side lounges. The kind of room you only notice when you're trying to disappear. It was mostly empty, just scattered glasses, limp flower arrangements, and party favors forgotten on marble tabletops. A place meant to impress, now echoing with hollowness. That kind of silence tells more truth than a speech. I found a quiet seat near the window and let my mind settle. I could still hear them, Sterling and his family, in the distance, laughing too loud for too long. You ever notice that? When folks are trying too hard, their joy starts to sound like shouting. I watched them through the crack in the doorway, all in sync, too polished. It reminded me of something I used to hear my boss say back at the shop. Sometimes, perfection is just the loudest mask in the room. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Mason, one of the guys who helps me run jobs when I'm slammed. I answered, keeping my voice low. Hey, you ever hear the name Redmond, out of state? He paused. Like Redmond Construction? Or the guy with the fake hedge fund mess a while back? No, family type. Posing real clean in the Lexington area. He chuckled. Man, I swear I've seen that name in some weird headline. Let me check when I'm back at the computer. Appreciate it. I ended the call and looked back through the door. They were still at it, laughing like it was scripted. One of the uncles tossed back a drink, exaggerated like a soap actor. It stuck with me. I found Harper near the bar, finally alone. She looked drained but still composed, her dress perfect, her hair still pinned. I motioned to her and she followed me into the hallway. You got a minute? I asked. She sighed. Trent, not tonight. Please. I'm not here to fight. Did you notice anything off about Sterling? His family? She paused, glanced back toward the lounge. You always do this. You look for something wrong when things are finally going right. Going right? I blinked. Harper? They're posing. You don't see it? Her eyes flared, just for a second. You don't get it. You never have. I lowered my voice. I know fake when I see it. And I'm telling you, this feels like theater. She turned away, whispering so no one else could hear. They're untouchable. That hit harder than anything else. Untouchable, as if she already knew she was playing along in something she couldn't stop. I stared at her. You're polishing silver so hard you forgot it can still tarnish. She bit her lip, hard. I saw doubt crack the corner of her expression, but she walked off before I could press more. I wandered back to the main room, but didn't sit. I drifted near the gift table, just watching. A woman, maybe late 40s, one of Sterling's aunts, was bent over the table. She looked both ways, then quietly removed a name tag from one wrap box and slid a different card on top. That's not something normal people do. I stepped closer, subtle, her face. I knew I'd seen her somewhere, not in person, online, one of those stock image faces you don't forget. I dug into my phone and pulled up a casting site I'd used once to vet a guy for a plumbing commercial. Searched quietly. There she was, under character actors, hired for events. My stomach twisted. It wasn't just arrogance, it was theater. I snapped a photo. Careful, quick. Didn't draw attention. I didn't need a confrontation. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I left the club around 10. Rain had started, tapping lightly on the windshield as I sat in my car, engine off, scrolling. The names, the faces, they weren't Redmonds. They were listed in talent agency portfolios. Wedding guests, corporate wives. Some had been in half-baked infomercials or community theater. None of them belonged to a single-family tree. I sat there, heart steady, no panic, just resolve. Americans like to think money equals morality, that if it shines, it must be gold. But I've been around enough plumbing leaks and rotten wood to know shine just hides the rot underneath. I opened my notes app, typed a single line, collect facts, not feelings. Then I looked at the napkin I'd tossed on my passenger seat earlier, folded like a lily, like Grandma used to do at every family holiday. I ran my thumb along its crease. That was dignity. Quiet, unfazed, lasting. I stared ahead as the rain streaked down the windshield. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. The morning light through my old bedroom blinds felt thinner than it used to. I'd slept here 1,000 times growing up, but it never really felt like mine, just a place to stay until I could afford a life elsewhere. I lay there for a while, going through the photos again on my phone. The fake relatives, the planted smiles, the staged toast. I wasn't crazy. I was just the only one paying attention. I made my way downstairs. The house smelled like cinnamon rolls and anxiety. Mom was fluttering around the kitchen like it was Easter morning. Harper was already dressed, hair fixed, pacing between the dining room and the back patio, pretending to be calm, but I saw it. Her shoulders were too stiff. her smile half-held. She didn't look like a woman about to get married, more like someone waiting for a verdict. Dad sat in his recliner, eyes on the morning news but not really watching. He hadn't asked me a single question since I arrived, and I hadn't expected him to. The silence between us had become a kind of tradition. At breakfast, Mom clapped her hands lightly. "Let's all just enjoy this moment, all right? Tomorrow's a big day. Everything's perfect." Perfect. She said it the same way people say fine when it clearly isn't. Everyone nodded. I didn't. I just chewed my toast, wondering when exactly this house had turned into a movie set. Maybe it always was. When you grow up somewhere that never quite fits, you stop asking why. You just learn how to stay small, quiet, out of the way. Just because it happened in your house doesn't mean it felt like home. It was around 10 when Sterling pulled into the driveway. New suit, fresh haircut, same crooked charm. He walked in like he was delivering a speech, arms open, voice raised. "Good morning, family." Behind him, the usual suspects followed. Same faces from last night, only today they looked even more polished. Too polished. One of the older women, same one who'd switched name tags at the club, hugged Sterling and said, "You look sharp as ever, Mr. Brennan." Brennan. She caught herself too late. I saw the color drain from her face. Sterling covered it with a laugh, kissed her cheek, and corrected her. "You're too funny, Aunt Lily. Brennan's the tailor." No one laughed. Not really. Harper's eyes met mine across the room. She knew I'd caught it, and she was begging me not to say a word. I didn't. I just raised my coffee cup and sipped. Even porcelain smiles eventually crack when held too tight. I stood, muttered something about needing air, and stepped into the garage. It was still cluttered with old tools, broken furniture, half-used paint cans, same as always, but it was the only space in the house that didn't pretend to be anything else. I leaned against the workbench and let my thoughts settle. This wasn't just deception, it was performance, polished, coordinated, and Harper. She was the only one not reading from a script. The past has a funny way of showing up when you're already worn thin. I remembered my college graduation. Everyone else's families filled entire rows, taking pictures, waving signs. Mine, one seat, my dad, who left before the reception. Later he said, the car had a flat, but I'd seen it parked 2 blocks away at a strip mall. No tow truck, no spare tire in sight. You start inventing excuses for people who never offered explanations. You tell yourself they meant well, that they forgot, that maybe they didn't know how much it mattered. Harper had been chasing approval ever since. From him, from everyone. Now Sterling. Maybe that's what made her blind. Not love, just the hope that someone, anyone, would stay. I walked back out to the backyard. The spring air was thick with pollen and tension. Sterling was there, near the garden fence, acting like he'd been waiting for me. "You dig too deep, you're going to find dirt," he said, smiling without warmth. I didn't reply, just kept my hands in my pockets. He stepped closer. "Some stories aren't meant for public stages, Trent, especially when the actors are under contract." I looked at him, really looked. Not the suit, not the smile, just the man behind it. Even stage lights can't hide a shadow forever. He tilted his head. "You think you're helping her, but you're just jealous." I let that hang in the air. It didn't deserve an answer. This wasn't about me being the overlooked brother anymore. It wasn't even about Harper choosing the wrong man. It was about truth. And whether anyone in this family still believed it mattered, I walked away without another word. Because sometimes silence does more damage than shouting. Morning sunlight spilled across the living room when I arrived from my early drive. Harper sat on the couch, hands clasped, eyes averted. In the hush, I noticed Sterling's so-called family arriving in black SUVs, polished cars with tinted windows. They stepped out in pairs, greeting Mom with practiced warmth. I stood by the doorway, heart pounding. Their smiles looked brittle, their laughter forced. One of them touched Mom's shoulder, too gentle, stage-like. I felt the room shrink. I thought of a headline I once skimmed, "Paid guest families make luxury events perfect." It gnawed at me. None of them spoke to us directly. Instead, they greeted in groups, laughed in cues, exchanged glances across the room. That family, I decided, was a show. I walked toward the breakfast table. Mom said, "Let me serve you some eggs, Trent," though she barely met my eyes. I nodded, but my mind weighed on what I'd seen. Today, I vowed, I would test their facade. At the luncheon that followed, I played it casual. I sat near a distant relative of Sterling and asked, "So, where's the Redmond family originally from?" The man froze mid-bite. He stuttered, "Oh, well, I believe they're from Virginia, possibly West Virginia." He corrected himself, calling Sterling Mr. Carrington. My chest tightened. Harper shot me a warning glare. Sterling's posture stiffened. The guest laughed it off. "Sorry, old joke." But everyone nearby stiffened. I felt the air change. Inside, a voice whispered, "They're hiding something." I waited. I didn't push further. I just nodded and changed the topic. The slip had been made. That was all I needed. Later, I found Mom in the garden, watering petunias. I approached slowly. "Do you trust them fully?" I asked. Her hand trembled over the ceramic pot. She looked up, eyes red. "I don't know what to believe anymore." She hesitated. I overheard Sterling's mother say something about our payroll over the phone. My pulse jumped. I swallowed hard. Tears threatened, but I held them back. "If we're going down," I said softly, "I'd rather do it knowing I tried." I saw the lily napkin from yesterday, folded and placed on an outdoor table. I retrieved it, folded it again tighter, an anchor. She watched me, tears in her eyes, but said nothing. When we reached the event venue in the afternoon, the facade slipped further. Sterling's entourage dominated the arrival walkway. During the introduction, the MC began thanking all family supporters, past and present, and carefully omitted my name. A distant cousin leaned over to me and muttered, "Looks like they forgot you existed." My chest burned. I kept quiet. I pressed record on my phone, hiding it under my sleeve. I thought, this is exclusion at its finest, subtle, repeated, but I'd capture it all. The insult was invisible to most, but to me it was loud. Every piece I'd gathered, every odd slip, every forced laugh, they were fractures in the mirror they'd built around themselves. I slipped into the shadows, waiting for the right moment to shatter it. I woke up before the sun did. The venue was silent, untouched. I walked the garden path alone, gravel crunching under my shoes, cold air pressing against my face. My hands were in my coat pockets, phone in one, folded lily napkin in the other. The place looked flawless, rose bushes trimmed to symmetry, chairs lined up like soldiers, but flawless never meant honest. Staff moved like ghosts, eyes lowered whenever Sterling's entourage passed. I overheard a whisper, "Don't interfere. Special instructions." That alone told me everything. For decades, silence kept our family from shattering, but silence was a coward's weapon, and I was done being quiet. I passed by the bridal suite window and caught my own reflection in the dark glass, tired eyes, drawn face. I leaned in closer and whispered, "Don't lose your dignity, even if they lose theirs." I turned away and headed toward the side entrance. That day wasn't about celebration. It was about control and whether I'd let them keep it. I found her in the bridal lounge, alone. Harper was sitting near the full-length mirror, veil bunched in her lap, one edge torn. She looked up slowly, eyes bloodshot. She hadn't slept. Not just tired, hollowed out. She didn't ask how I found her. "I know something's off," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "but I'm already in too deep." I didn't rush her, just sat on the edge of the couch across from her. She rubbed her temples. "They feel staged. You were right, but it's too late. Guests are arriving. Vendors are here. I can't pull the plug." "You're not stuck," I said. "You're scared. Those aren't the same." She didn't respond. Her bottom lip trembled, but she bit it down hard. "People will talk, Trenton. They'll blame me. They'll say I made it up." "Let them," I said. "Better to be blamed for breaking free than congratulated for walking into a trap." Tears came then, silent ones. She wiped them away fast like they weren't allowed. I stood. "I won't stop you from going through with it," I told her. "But I also won't pretend this is fine." She nodded once, couldn't meet my eyes. I left her there, veil still bunched, mirror still reflecting someone she didn't recognize. I stepped into the back lot a little after 10. No guests were out there yet, just the sound of distant chatter from the loading area and birds in the trees overhead. That's when Sterling found me. He came around the corner like he'd been waiting, hands in his pockets, jacket unbuttoned, smile thin as a blade. "No cameras out here," he said. I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "Let's skip the performance, Trent." I know you've been snooping." I stayed silent, phone already recording in my coat pocket. He leaned in. "You pull anything today, anything, and I'll make sure Harper's life becomes a circus of lawsuits, public humiliation, and media hell. I have the means. And trust me, I don't bluff." I met his eyes, calm, steady. "Bullies think calm means fear," I said. "They've never seen calm used as a weapon." He laughed. "You don't scare me." "You don't matter enough to scare me," I replied. He sneered, turned, and walked away like he'd won something. But he hadn't seen the phone in my pocket still blinking red. I sat in the rental car for a long minute after he left, pulled out the phone, saved the file, transferred it to my cloud drive. Then I opened the folder. Everything I'd gathered, fake family profiles, photo tags, video clips, and now this. His voice, clear and smug, threatening my sister's life. I sent it all to two places, my own email, and to Claire Ramirez, a journalist I trusted. She didn't owe me favors, but she owed the truth, the time of day. I looked up at the venue. Music was starting to play. Staff was beginning to shuffle guests toward the main lawn. I folded the napkin lily again, this time tighter, sharper at the edges. The symbol wasn't just dignity anymore, it was strategy. I stood, adjusted my collar, walked toward the ceremony like a man carrying nothing, because they were looking for emotion. They were waiting for a scene, but I was giving them timing. The ceremony grounds were quiet when I arrived, just a few early guests pacing on the lawn. The string quartet had just begun their soft tuning. I walked through clusters of folding chairs, scanning faces I'd stored in memory, and comparing them to faces I'd seen in agency listings. Some of them shifted, glanced at watches, twisted accents betraying nerves. Harper walked beside me, fingers brushing mine, her jaw tight. I squeezed her hand. The lily fold in my front pocket felt like a hidden badge of resolve. This was it, the calm before everything broke. By the time the procession started, the crowd had grown. I walked toward my seat when a man standing nearby, posing as a cousin, called out, "Thanks for helping us set up staff. Waiter." Laughter rippled. A few people glanced. Harper winced. I froze for a moment. I didn't correct him. Instead, I let it hang. They'd underestimated patience. Beneath my breath, I thought, they believe insult is power. They're about to learn something new. I tapped record on my phone, slipped it into my jacket pocket, let them play their games. During the unity ceremony, the officiant called names of family supporters. Silver nameplates gleamed on a side table. When one read Ms. Redmond instead of Mrs. Redmond, I leaned to Harper and whispered, "They can't even fake a nameplate correctly." She stiffened but kept her expression polite. I saw recognition flicker. This slip was a weak link in their act. Every photo, every lie. I'd been waiting for one small crack. It came. After the vows, while guests shifted for applause, I rose without announcing. I stepped to the microphone. The hush startled the crowd. My voice calm, I played the recording from Sterling's threat. Silence rippled. Sterling's face left color. I spoke. "This wedding isn't about love, it's about illusions built by hired hands." Some guests gasped. Some murmured. Harper's face changed. Fear softened. Pride appeared. I kept tone level, eyes on the crowd. The truth detonated in that moment. The facade fractured. The event staff froze. Sterling's family actors stuttered, caught mid-smile. People glanced toward the recording device tucked in my coat. No one moved. I held their gaze. "You can't script integrity," I said softly. But tonight, I let the truth speak. The controlled explosion had begun. I stepped back into the reception hall after the recording. The murmur was electric. Half disbelief, half hunger for explanation. Guests turned between me and Sterling's contingent, eyes wide, phones out. I felt the current shift underneath my feet. Harper slipped past to the veranda. I followed, heart tight. She stood on the edge, staring out over the lawns. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hey," I said softly. She leaned into me without words. I watched the crowd through the glass doors, some checking their phones, others whispering names I'd never heard. Sterling stood rigid, brow furrowed, his polished mask cracked in the half-light. I took a breath, surrendered control of the center stage to truth's gravity. One guest, older, dignified, raised her voice. "I thought he was staff. Why is he being treated like one of the family?" Heads turned. Cameras swung. Sterling's mother froze, tugging at her necklace. A ripple of recognition passed through the crowd. Others leaned forward, reading name tags, whispering, scanning faces. I heard one woman mutter, "I've seen that lady in some catalog shoot." Their eyes widened. Adrenaline coursed. I felt validation, not triumph, but gravity. The truth now had momentum. The slate they built began to crumble at the edges. Sterling intercepted me near the lounge doorway. "You think you've won something? You exposed me, fine. But mark this. Harper's reputation is mine to guard." He spoke in a sharp whisper so others wouldn't hear. "One rumor, one slip, and she'll decide she made a mistake marrying me. Then you'll see how quickly people turn." I didn't flinch. I handed back the phone. "That's not a threat. It's a record." I met his eyes, calm but cold. He spat a word under his breath and turned away, pacing toward his circle. He believed he still held control, but the room around us was listening. Guests started approaching me, women in cocktail dresses, older men in suits. "I'm sorry," one whispered. "I should have known better." Harper came out to stand beside me. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. Sterling's actors shrank into the background, their smiles brittle. Some guests confronted them. Others turned to me with questions. The family looked rattled, exchanging panic and sideways glances. I raised my voice steady. "You can't pay people to love you, but you can't force them to stay silent either." The words hung. No applause yet, just stunned silence, then a soft clap. Others stood, followed by more hands. Harper squeezed my arm. The gesture said everything. We'd passed a threshold. The tide had turned. The evening air in the reception hall was thick with the smell of lilies and polished wood. The lanterns hanging over the terrace swayed slightly, casting soft gold across the guests' faces. They weren't laughing now. Their chatter had dropped to a careful murmur, eyes sliding my way, phones in their hands angled like weapons waiting for a shot. Harper stood close, her arm slipping into mine. Not a gesture for show, but an anchor. I could feel her fingers tighten every time another whisper spread. In my pocket, Sterling's recorded threats burned like a live coal. This was the moment I had rehearsed 100 times in my head, and yet my heart thudded steady. The lily napkin folded in my hand reminded me why I was here. Not to ruin a party, not to humiliate anyone. To peel back a lie that had been fed to me for years. From the corner of my eye, I saw Beatrix break away from a cluster of guests. She came toward me with a tremor in her step. People watched her, some already recording. "Please," she said, her voice cracked under the chandelier glow. "Please don't ruin everything. For me, for the family." Her mascara traced a line down her cheek. I looked at her and held the silence for a beat that seemed to stretch forever. "I won't destroy," I said quietly. "I'll expose." She flinched as if struck. Her eyes darted around at the guests staring at us now. "You don't understand what you're doing," she whispered. "You're about to burn it all down." But she couldn't hold my gaze. She turned her face and the wedding guests murmured louder, like a tide turning. In that moment, her plea became more than a plea. It was a confession. The facade she'd built was cracking right there in front of everyone. I walked to the stage as someone raised a glass for a toast. My steps were slow but certain. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but my voice came out calm and firm. "There's something you all need to see." I held up my phone, tapped play, and the speakers filled with Sterling's own voice. Contracts flashed on the screen behind me, the actor payments, the rehearsal scripts, the lines about family unity and rich tradition that they had practiced like a show. The crowd gasped. I saw faces turn, jaws set, fingers flying over phones to record. Sterling's family froze like mannequins. A few of them broke and bolted for the door. Others just stood in silence. I looked at Sterling, whose smile had died on his face, and gave him the line I had saved. They built a stage to hide their lies. Tonight, the stage collapses. The room cracked open with noise. People stood, some shouting, some crying. The myth of his wealth and pedigree fell apart in real time. Guests swarmed the stage, phones raised high, questions shooting out like darts. "Is this true? How could you do this? Who paid you?" Sterling stumbled back, reaching for Beatrix, who had already stepped away. Harper was beside me before the first microphone reached my face. She wrapped her arms around me. Her eyes were wet but steady. "You did it," she whispered. "You didn't destroy them. You freed yourself." Loretta came forward through the crush of people, her eyes red-rimmed, shaking her head. "I suspected," she said softly. "But seeing it—" She trailed off, biting her lip. The hall hummed with outrage, but also something like release. I raised my voice above the noise. "You can't script integrity. It arises." Harper bent down and picked up the lily napkin I had dropped when I took the stage. She folded it sharply, her fingers precise, and placed it back in my palm. The same napkin that had been my anchor now felt like a flag planted in new soil. Around us, the guests were no longer whispering about me. They were whispering about the truth. I didn't smile. I just stood there breathing, feeling something heavier than revenge lift from my chest. Chapter 9. The Resolution. Moving beyond the past. The morning light slipped through Harper's kitchen window like it was trying not to wake me. It was the kind of soft glow that made the edges of things look less harsh, like the world was trying to apologize for yesterday. I stood there by the counter, barefoot, pouring eggs into a skillet, like it was just another morning. But it wasn't. Everything had changed. Or maybe I had. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was still, but not numb. I cracked the toast too hard, and crumbs scattered across the counter. Didn't bother cleaning them right away. I let things be. Made coffee. Sat down. Looked out at the small yard behind Harper's house. Her old swing creaked in the breeze. I could have sat there forever, pretending the past had packed up and left during the night. But my phone buzzed. Dozens of messages, more than I'd seen in years. Most were from strangers. "You did what no one dared. Truth matters. You gave us courage." Some were quiet nods from people I hadn't heard from in decades. I read them all, slowly, one by one, letting them sink in. I wasn't looking for praise, but I won't lie. It helped. It meant the silence had broken, not just mine. The news played low from Harper's living room. Sterling had vanished overnight. Fled. Investors pulled out. His name, now covered in lawsuits, trended everywhere. One of his hired family members spoke out. Shaky voice, head down. "We were paid. We regret it. We thought it was a performance." But it got real. I didn't feel triumph, just distance. Like I'd finally walked out of a room I didn't know I was locked in. I stepped back into the kitchen to rinse my plate when Harper came in, hair still damp, sweater slipping off her shoulder. She didn't speak right away, just walked over, rested her hand over mine. "You didn't destroy them," she said gently. "You freed yourself." I believed her. I wanted to. The day passed slow, like time knew I needed it to stretch. Just after noon, my phone rang again. I almost didn't answer when I saw the name. Loretta. "Hi," I said. Just that. No tone. No baggage. She didn't hesitate. I saw everything. I didn't know what came next, but what she said wasn't what I expected. "I was wrong about you. I'm sorry it took the whole world watching for me to see your worth." I swallowed. Not out of anger, just old dust. "We all wear blinders until we're forced to look in the mirror." She let out a soft breath. "Maybe now we can see things clearer." It wasn't closure. It wasn't healing. But it was a beginning. And that was enough. Later that afternoon, Harper offered me her guest house. "Stay as long as you want," she said, handing me the spare key with no strings attached. I held it for a long time. I thought about leaving, about driving out, starting new. But standing in that garden with her, the late sun warming the soil, I realized maybe this was the fresh start, not distance, just truth. We walked through the small community garden a block away. She pointed at the tomatoes she never remembers to water. I knelt by a bare patch and pressed my fingers into the dirt. "Plant something," she said. So I did. A lily, the same flower I'd clung to in a napkin not too long ago, now going into the ground, real, rooted. As we brushed the soil off our hands, she looked at me and said, "By the way, the shelter got a big donation this morning, anonymous, but they tagged your name in a thank you post." I didn't ask who sent it, Didn't need to. Sometimes you bury the past not to forget it, but to let something new grow from the dirt it left behind.